Jack Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he rode his horse across the dusty Arizona desert. The year was 1887 and the summer heat was brutal. He had been working his ranch for 15 long years now, building it from nothing but dirt and dreams. The land was harsh, unforgiving, but Jack had learned to survive here. He wasn't alone in this desert, though. His neighbors were Apache people, and over the years he had learned their ways, respected their traditions, and earned their trust. That hot afternoon, a young Apache boy came running to Jack's ranch, his face filled with panic. "Come quickly," the boy gasped, trying to catch his breath. "Chief Nahilzai needs you. He's dying." Jack's heart sank. Chief Nahilzai was more than just a neighbor. He was a friend, a man who had taught Jack how to find water in the driest places, how to read the desert signs, how to survive when everything seemed hopeless. Jack immediately saddled his fastest horse and rode toward the Apache camp. When he arrived, he found the chief lying on a mat inside his dwelling, his breathing shallow and labored. A rattlesnake had bitten him 3 days ago, and despite all efforts, the poison was winning. The tribal elders stood around him, their faces grave and serious. The chief's 2 wives knelt beside him, tears streaming down their faces. Chief Nahilzai opened his eyes when he heard Jack enter. His once strong voice was now just a whisper. "Jack Morrison," he said slowly, "you have been a good friend to our people. You have shown respect when others showed hatred. You have shared your water when others built fences." Jack knelt beside his friend, not knowing what to say. He could see death approaching, and it broke his heart. The chief continued, each word taking great effort. "I have no sons, no brothers who still live. My wives, Casa and Ayana, they will be alone when I am gone. In our world, a woman without protection is vulnerable. Other men will try to claim them not from love, but from greed for my horses, my weapons, my position." Jack listened carefully, still not understanding where this was going. "I am asking you, Jack Morrison, to take responsibility for them. Give them shelter. Give them safety. Protect them as I would have protected them." The chief's hand reached out weakly and Jack took it. "Of course," Jack said without hesitation. "They can live on my land. I'll make sure nobody bothers them. You have my word." But the chief shook his head slightly. "No, my friend. You do not understand our way. I am not asking you to give them a house. I am asking you to take them as your wives. According to our law, according to our tradition, you will inherit them. They will be your responsibility in every way." Jack felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. "Wives? 2 wives?" He looked at the tribal elders, hoping someone would say this was a misunderstanding. But their faces were serious, nodding in agreement. This was real. This was their law. "Chief, Jack started, but the dying man squeezed his hand. "Please, I can only die in peace knowing they are truly protected. Not as guests, but as family. Will you honor this request?" Jack looked at the 2 women. Casa, the older one, was 23 years old. Her eyes were fierce and proud even through her tears. She had always been strong-willed, never backing down from anything. Yana, 21, was different. She was gentle, thoughtful, always bringing calm to difficult situations. Both women were beautiful, but right now they just looked terrified and heartbroken. What could Jack say? His friend was dying. These women would indeed be vulnerable without protection. The frontier was a dangerous place, especially for women alone. But taking them as wives? Jack had never even considered marriage, let alone to 2 women at once. His Christian upbringing told him this was wrong. Society would call it scandalous. The neighboring ranchers would never accept it. But looking into his dying friend's eyes, Jack knew he couldn't refuse. Some things mattered more than what society thought. Some promises were too important to break. "I will honor your request," Jack finally said. "I give you my word." Chief Nahilzai's face relaxed for the first time since Jack had arrived. A small smile crossed his lips. "You are a good man, Jack Morrison. Better than most." He turned his head slightly toward his wives. "Casa, Ayana, this man will care for you. Respect him as you respected me. He walks a different path, but his heart is true." The tribal elders immediately began preparations for the ceremony. Even though the chief was dying, this was too important to delay. They needed witnesses. They needed to make it official according to Apache law. Jack stood there in a daze as they brought forward ceremonial items, as they spoke words in Apache that he only partly understood. Casa and Ayana stood on either side of him. Neither woman looked at him. Their eyes were fixed on their dying husband, their hearts breaking. Jack realized that none of them had chosen this. The chief was forcing this arrangement on all three of them. The women didn't want a new husband, especially not a white rancher they barely knew. And Jack certainly hadn't woken up that morning planning to get married, let alone twice. The ceremony was brief, but binding. When it was over, the elders nodded their approval. In the eyes of the Apache people, Jack Morrison was now the husband of Casa and Ayanna. The responsibility was his, the obligation was his. Whether any of them liked it or not, Chief Nahilzai died 2 hours later, surrounded by his people. Jack stayed for the funeral rites, feeling like an outsider even though he was now technically family. When it was time to leave, he found himself riding back to his ranch with 2 women following behind him on their horses. They carried their belongings in leather bags. Everything they owned in the world now belonged to a man they hardly knew. The ride back was silent except for the sound of hooves on hard ground. Jack's mind was racing. What had he just agreed to? How was this supposed to work? Where would they sleep? What would people say? What would the women expect from him? When they finally reached the ranch as the sun was setting, Jack helped them down from their horses. His small ranch house suddenly seemed very small indeed. It had been built for 1 person, not 3. There was 1 bedroom, 1 main room that served as both kitchen and living space, and a porch. That was it. Jack stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do or say. Casa walked past him without a word, went straight to the barn and began making a bed for herself in the hay. Her message was clear. She wanted nothing to do with this arrangement. Ayanna was more polite but equally distant. She quietly began unpacking her things, her movements slow and sad. Jack could see she was still crying silently for the man she had just buried. That first night, Jack lay on the porch under the stars, listening to the sounds of his ranch. But now there were new sounds. He could hear Ayanna crying softly in the bedroom. He could hear Casa moving around in the barn, probably unable to sleep. And he lay there thinking about how one promise, made to a dying friend, had completely turned his world upside down. 3 strangers, now bound together by tradition and duty, trying to figure out how to survive this impossible situation. Jack stared up at the desert stars and wondered what on earth he had gotten himself into. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new awkwardness, new questions. But tonight, all 3 of them simply grieved, each in their own way for the life they had lost and the uncertain future that lay ahead. The first morning after everything changed, Jack woke up on the porch with his back aching and his mind foggy. For a brief moment he forgot what had happened. Then reality crashed back into him like a bucket of cold water. He had 2 wives now. 2 women who didn't want to be here. 2 strangers living in his house. He could smell coffee brewing. Someone was already awake inside. Jack got up slowly, brushed the dust off his clothes, and walked into the house. Ayanna was standing by the small stove making breakfast. She didn't look at him when he entered. Her eyes were red from crying all night. "Good morning," Jack said quietly, not sure what else to say. Ayanna nodded but didn't speak. She placed a plate of food on the table and gestured for him to sit. The food looked good, but Jack couldn't taste anything. The awkwardness in the room was suffocating. He tried to think of something to say, some way to break this terrible silence, but every word that came to mind seemed wrong. "Where's Casa?" he finally asked. Ayanna pointed toward the barn. Jack sighed. He finished eating quickly and went outside to find her. Casa was already working, feeding the horses with rough, angry movements. When she saw Jack approaching, her eyes flashed with defiance. "I don't need your permission to work," she said sharply in broken English. "I wasn't going to—" Jack started, but she cut him off. "I sleep in barn. I work, that's all. Don't expect anything else." Her tone made it crystal clear what she meant by anything else. She wanted no part of being a wife to him in any real sense. Jack held up his hands in surrender. "Casa, listen. I know this isn't what you wanted. It's not what I wanted either. But your husband asked me to protect you, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not asking for anything from you, just let me help. Let me keep you safe." Casa stared at him for a long moment, her jaw tight. "I can keep myself safe," she said, then turned back to the horses, making it clear the conversation was over. Jack walked back to the house, feeling defeated. This was going to be harder than he thought. The days that followed were some of the most uncomfortable of Jack's life. The ranch that had been his peaceful refuge now felt like a battlefield of silence and tension. Ayanna cooked and cleaned, but she moved around like a ghost, never speaking unless absolutely necessary. Casa refused to even come inside for meals. She would take her food to the barn and eat alone. At night, Jack continued sleeping on the porch while Ayanna took the bedroom and Casa stayed in the barn with the horses. They barely spoke to each other. When they did, it was only about practical things. The fence needs fixing. The well is running low. Supplies needed from town. Nothing personal. Nothing real. But if the awkwardness inside the ranch was bad, the reaction from the outside world was even worse. News traveled fast in the territory. Within days, everyone knew that Jack Morrison had taken 2 Apache women into his home. The whispers started immediately. When Jack went to town for supplies, the stares followed him everywhere. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store, barely hid her disgust. "Living in sin," she muttered loud enough for him to hear. Other ranchers he had known for years crossed the street to avoid talking to him. Some laughed behind his back. Others looked at him with pure contempt. "Heard you got yourself a couple of squaws," old Pete Johnson said with a nasty grin. "Must be nice having 2 women to warm your bed." Jack felt his fist clench, but he forced himself to stay calm. Fighting wouldn't help anything. He got his supplies and left town as quickly as possible, feeling the weight of judgment on his back the entire time. But it wasn't just the white community that was watching. The Apache people were observing carefully too. Would Jack honor Chief Nahilzai's wishes with respect, or would he treat Casa and Ayanna poorly? The tribal elders made it known that they were keeping close watch on the situation. If Jack dishonored the women, there would be consequences. Jack felt trapped between 2 worlds, accepted by neither, judged by both. 3 weeks after the women arrived, things reached a breaking point. It was late evening and Jack was on the porch fixing a bridle when he heard shouting from inside the house. He rushed in to find Casa and Ayanna arguing in Apache, their voices rising with emotion. He couldn't understand most of what they were saying, but he caught enough words to know they were arguing about him, about the situation, about what to do. Ayanna was crying again, and Casa looked angrier than he had ever seen her. When they noticed Jack standing there, they both fell silent immediately. "What's going on?" Jack asked gently. Neither woman answered at first. Finally, Ayanna spoke in her limited English. "This, not right. We are burden. You not happy. We not happy. Chief Nahilzai meant well, but it was a mistake," Casa finished, her English better than her sister wife's. "You should find us different place. We leave, better for everyone." Jack felt something twist in his chest. They wanted to leave. Part of him felt relieved at the idea. Life would go back to normal. No more awkwardness. No more judgment from town. No more tension. But another part of him, a part he didn't fully understand yet, felt wrong about it. "Where would you go?" he asked quietly. Case's confident expression faltered slightly. The truth was they had nowhere to go. No family to take them in. No home to return to. In Apache society, without a husband's protection, they would be vulnerable. Other men might try to claim them, not from respect or love, but from opportunism. "We figure something out," Casa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Jack sat down heavily in a chair. "Look, I know this is hard. Trust me, I know. Every morning I wake up and wonder what I was thinking. But your husband was my friend. He asked me to protect you and I gave him my word. I can't break that promise just because things are uncomfortable." "We don't need protection," Casa insisted stubbornly. "Maybe you don't," Jack said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "But that doesn't change the fact that I made a promise. And out here, a man's word is all he has. If I break my word, I'm nothing." Ayanna looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You are good man," she said softly. "But you deserve normal life. Normal wife." "Not this." Jack laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Normal? There's nothing normal about life out here. We're all just trying to survive the best we can." The 3 of them sat in silence for a while. The tension was still there, but something had shifted slightly. At least they were talking now. At least they were in the same room instead of avoiding each other. "How about this?" Jack said finally. "Let's just try to make the best of a bad situation. I'm not asking you to be, real wives. I'm just asking you to stay safe, Help out around the ranch and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Deal? Casa looked like she wanted to argue, but Ayana spoke first. Deal, she said quietly. Casa glared at her sister-wife, then at Jack, then finally nodded reluctantly. Fine, but I still sleep in barn. That's up to you, Jack said, feeling a small sense of relief. After that night, things were still awkward, but slightly less impossible. Casa started coming inside for meals, though she still retreated to the barn afterward. Ayana began teaching Jack some Apache words which helped them communicate better. Jack made sure to treat both women with respect, never demanding anything, never assuming anything, just trying to share the space as peacefully as possible. But the outside world remained hostile. Every trip to town brought more stares, more whispers, more judgment. The neighboring ranchers stopped doing business with Jack. The church made it clear he was no longer welcome at services. Even the children in town were told to stay away from that Morrison place. Jack tried not to let it bother him, but isolation was hard. Some nights he would sit on the porch and think about how much easier his life had been before all this. He had been lonely, sure, but at least he had been accepted. Now he had company, but he was an outcast. One evening, about a month after the women arrived, Jack found Ayana sitting on the porch steps, looking up at the stars. He sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. You miss him, Jack said. It wasn't a question. Ayana nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Every day. Every moment. I'm sorry, Jack said, meaning it. I'm sorry you lost him. I'm sorry you're stuck here with me. I'm sorry everything is so complicated. Ayana was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. You are not bad man, Jack Morrison. Chief Nahil's I chose well. Maybe one day this not feel so strange. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to him in weeks. Jack felt a lump in his throat. Maybe, he agreed softly. Inside the house, through the window, they could see Casa preparing for bed. She was still angry, still resistant, still sleeping in the barn. But she was here. They were all here. 3 strangers under one roof, bound by duty and tradition, trying to figure out how to exist together. The night was cool and quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The desert stretched out endlessly in all directions. And on that small ranch, 3 people who never chose each other were slowly, painfully learning to coexist. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even close to comfort. But it was a beginning, however awkward and uncertain it might be. 2 months after the women arrived, the drought came. It started gradually, with the usual summer heat stretching longer than normal. Then the fall rains never came. The winter was dry as bone. By early spring, the situation had become desperate. The creek that ran through Jack's property slowed to a trickle, then stopped completely. The grass turned brown and brittle. The cattle grew thin and restless. Jack stood looking at his dried-up water source, fear gnawing at his gut. Without water, everything would die. The cattle, the horses, the crops he'd planted. His entire life's work would turn to dust and blow away. He had never seen it this bad before. He didn't know what to do. That evening, he sat on the porch with his head in his hands, trying to think of a solution. Ayana came out and sat beside him. Her English had improved considerably over the past weeks. What troubles you? She asked. No water, Jack said simply. If we don't find water soon, we'll lose everything. Ayana was quiet for a moment, then said, I will speak with Casa. Jack didn't understand why, but he nodded. A few minutes later, both women came out to the porch. Casa looked at him with her usual defensive expression, but there was something different in her eyes. There is water, she said. Jack looked up, hope flaring in his chest. Where? Hidden Springs, in the rocks 3 miles north. My people know them. White people never look there. Can you show me? Jack asked. Casa hesitated. This was her people's knowledge, secrets passed down through generations. Sharing them with an outsider felt like a betrayal. But then she looked around at the dying land, at the suffering animals, and she thought about how Jack had kept his word, how he had treated them with respect even when the whole world turned against him. Tomorrow, she said, I show you. The next morning before dawn, the 3 of them rode out together. Casa led the way, taking them through terrain Jack had never explored. She seemed to know every rock, every plant, every shadow. After an hour of riding, she stopped at what looked like just another pile of boulders. Here, she said, dismounting. Jack looked around, confused. He saw nothing but dry rocks and dead brush. But Casa climbed between 2 large boulders, disappearing from sight. Jack and Ayanna followed. On the other side, hidden completely from view, was a small pool of clear water fed by an underground spring. It wasn't huge, but it was enough. "This is incredible," Jack breathed. "How did you know?" "My father taught me." His father taught him. "We always know where water hides." Casa looked at him seriously. "This is Apache knowledge. You understand? You cannot tell other white men. They will take it, ruin it, claim it for themselves." "I understand," Jack promised. "This stays between us." Over the following weeks, they developed a system. Jack built a hidden pipeline from the spring to his ranch, disguising it carefully so no one would notice. It was hard, exhausting work, but all three of them worked together. Casa's knowledge of the land proved invaluable. She showed Jack which plants could survive with minimal water, which animals would lead them to hidden moisture, how to read the desert in ways he had never imagined. Ayanna contributed her own skills. She knew healing plants, how to preserve food, how to make things last when resources were scarce. One afternoon, Jack cut his hand badly on a sharp rock while working. Ayanna immediately took charge, cleaning the wound and applying a poultice made from desert plants. Within days, the wound was healing cleanly with no infection. "Where did you learn this?" Jack asked, amazed. "My grandmother was healer," Ayanna explained. "She taught me many things. Plants have medicine if you know how to ask them." As they worked together day after day, something began to change. The awkward silence transformed into comfortable conversation. Jack taught them more English, and they taught him Apache. Not just words, but the meaning behind the words, the culture, the way of thinking. He learned that when Casa seemed angry, she was often just being direct in a way her culture valued. He learned that when Ayanna was quiet, she was observing and thinking deeply, not withdrawing. They learned about him too. They discovered that Jack was actually quite funny when he relaxed, that he was fair-minded and kept his word even when it cost him, that he worked harder than any man they had known, never asking them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. One evening in late spring, a violent storm rolled in. The wind howled like a demon, and dust filled the air so thick you couldn't see 3 feet ahead. Jack was out checking on the cattle when it hit. He got disoriented in the blinding dust, lost track of direction. He could have wandered in circles until he collapsed from exhaustion. But then he heard Casa's voice cutting through the wind, calling his name. He followed the sound and found her standing on a high rock, waving a torch to guide him. She had seen the storm coming and had been watching for him. When he finally reached safety, soaked with sweat and covered in dust, Casa just nodded and said, "You work too hard, too stubborn to come in from storm." It was the first time she had shown concern for him. Jack realized with surprise that she had been worried, that she had risked herself in the storm to find him. "Thank you," he said, meaning more than just thanks for the rescue. Casa looked away, uncomfortable with gratitude. "We are partners now. Partners watch out for each other. Partners, not prisoners, not obligations. Partners." That night, for the first time since she arrived, Casa didn't go to the barn. She stayed in the house, sleeping on a mat near the fireplace. It was a small change, but it felt monumental. A few weeks later, disaster struck again. Jack was working with a young, unbroken horse, trying to gentle it. The horse spooked suddenly, reared up, and kicked Jack hard in the ribs. He went down like a sack of grain, the breath knocked out of him, pain exploding through his chest. Ayanna saw it happen. She ran faster than Jack had ever seen anyone move. Within minutes, she had him inside the house, had his shirt off, her hands carefully checking his ribs. Jack gasped in pain with every breath. "Broken," Ayanna said grimly. 3, maybe 4 ribs, maybe worse inside. She looked terrified, and Jack realized she thought he might die, just like her first husband had died from injury and poison. "I'll be okay," Jack tried to say, but another wave of pain cut him off. For the next 2 weeks, Ayanna barely left his side. She made him tease to manage pain, applied poultices to reduce swelling, forced him to rest when he tried to get up and work. Casa took over all the heavy ranch work without complaint, doing the work of 2 people so Jack could heal. During those long days of recovery, Jack and Ayanna talked more than they ever had before. She told him about her childhood, about her grandmother who raised her, about the Apache way of seeing the world. He told her about his family back east, about why he came west, about his dreams for the ranch. "Why you never married before?" Ayanna asked one evening. "You are a good man." Any woman would be lucky. Jack thought about that. I guess I was waiting for the right person. Someone who understood this life. Someone strong enough to handle the frontier. He paused, then added quietly, "Someone like you and Casa." Ayana looked at him with surprise. It was the first time Jack had acknowledged that he saw them as more than just obligations. "We are Apache," she said softly. "You are white. World says this is wrong." "The world says a lot of things," Jack replied. "Doesn't mean the world is right." By the time Jack recovered, summer had arrived. Nearly a year had passed since Chief Nahilzai's death. The three of them had survived drought, storms, isolation, and injury together. They had learned each other's languages and each other's ways. The ranch was actually thriving, better managed than when Jack had run it alone. One evening, they all sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. It had become their routine, this quiet time at the end of the day. They would talk about the work done and the work ahead, share stories, sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. "My cattle are healthier than my neighbors," Jack observed. "My land is greener. Even in this drought, we're doing better than anyone around." "Because you listen," Casa said. "Most white men think they know everything. You listen and learn." "I had good teachers," Jack said, looking at both of them. Ayana smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. It was beautiful to see. "We make good teams," she said. "Yes," Casa agreed, and there was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Something warm. Jack felt his heart do a strange flip in his chest. Somewhere along the way, without him quite noticing when it happened, these two women had become more than just people he was protecting. They had become partners, friends, maybe even something more, though he was afraid to name it. That night, after the women had gone to bed, Jack sat alone on the porch thinking. He remembered the first night they arrived. How impossible everything had seemed, how sure he had been that this arrangement could never work. But they had worked together, struggled together, survived together, and in the process of learning to survive, they had learned something else. They actually liked each other. The walls of obligation and duty were crumbling, and in their place, something real was growing. Something none of them had expected. Something that both excited and terrified Jack in equal measure. Inside the house, Casa lay awake thinking similar thoughts. She had spent months fighting against this situation, angry at being treated like property. It was 6 months after Chief Nahilzai's death when Jack finally admitted the truth to himself. He was in love. The realization hit him one ordinary morning while watching Casa work with the horses and Ayana tend the garden. His heart swelled with a feeling so strong it almost knocked him off his feet. But here was the impossible part. He was in love with both of them. At first, Jack tried to deny it. This couldn't be real. People didn't fall in love with two people at the same time. It wasn't natural. It wasn't right. His Christian upbringing screamed at him that this was sinful, wrong, impossible. He spent days fighting with himself, trying to convince his heart to choose one or the other. But his heart refused to cooperate. Casa made him feel alive in ways he had forgotten were possible. Her strength, her fire, her fierce independence challenged him and excited him. When she smiled, which was rare but beautiful, his whole world lit up. When she stood up to him, refusing to back down from an argument, he found himself admiring her spirit rather than being frustrated by it. She was like lightning, powerful and impossible to control, and he loved every moment of being near her. But Ayana brought him something completely different, something equally precious. Her gentle wisdom calmed the chaos in his mind. When he was worried or stressed, just sitting near her made everything feel manageable. Her quiet strength was different from Casa's bold defiance, but no less powerful. She saw through people in a way that was almost mystical, understanding things that were never spoken aloud. When she looked at him with those deep, thoughtful eyes, Jack felt seen in a way he had never experienced before. How could he choose between lightning and peace, between fire and water? They were both essential, both part of what made his life feel complete now. The thought of losing either one felt like losing a part of himself. For weeks, Jack wrestled with his feelings in silence. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat properly. The weight of his realization was crushing him. What kind of man fell in love with two women? What kind of person wanted something so completely against everything society said was right? Meanwhile, Casa and Ayana were facing their own truths. They had spent many nights talking after Jack fell asleep. sharing their confused feelings in whispered Apache. "I think about him all the time," Ayana admitted one night, shame coloring her voice. "I loved my first husband. I thought I would never feel this way again. But Jack is different. Good, kind. And when he looks at me, I feel my heart race like a young girl again." Casa was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "I feel it too. I hate that I feel it. I fought so hard not to care. But somewhere between the drought and the storms and all the work, he became more than just the white man I was forced to live with. He became," she struggled to find words, "important to me." "What do we do?" Ayana asked. "This is not normal. People will say terrible things. They already say terrible things, but if we actually choose him—" "I know," Casa said quietly, "but when did we start caring what people think? We are already outcasts, already judged. At least if we choose this, we choose it freely, not because we were forced, but because we want it." "Do you think he feels the same?" Ayana wondered. "I see the way he looks at you," Casa said. "Like you are water in the desert. Like you are precious." "He looks at you the same way," Ayana replied. "Like you are the sunrise. Like you are the most beautiful thing he has ever seen." The two women sat in the darkness, both realizing they were in love with the same man. In most situations, this would breed jealousy and rivalry. But their situation was already so unusual that normal rules didn't seem to apply. They had been sister wives to Chief Nahilzai, sharing him without conflict. Could they do the same with Jack? "Our people accept plural marriage," Casa said thoughtfully. "The chief had both of us and loved us both. Why is it so strange if we both love Jack?" "Because the white world says it is wrong," Ayana answered. "And we are already in enough trouble with that world." "The white world also says we are less than human," Casa said sharply. "Should we believe that too? Or should we make our own choices about what is right?" The tension in the house grew thick over the following days. All three of them knew something had to break, but nobody knew how to start the conversation. Jack grew more quiet and brooding. Casa became snappish and restless. Ayana withdrew into worried silence. They were like a pot of water boiling on the stove, pressure building, waiting to explode. The breakthrough came on a cool evening in late autumn. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Ayana did something incredibly brave. She simply spoke the truth. "Jack," she said softly, "we need to talk about what is happening between us." Jack felt his heart stop. "What do you mean?" he asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. "Do not pretend," Casa said, her voice unusually gentle. "We all feel it. The question is what we do about it." Jack's hands were shaking. He gripped the porch railing to steady himself. "I don't know what to say. I don't even know if what I'm feeling is right or wrong anymore." "Tell us what you feel," Ayana encouraged. "No judgment. Just truth." Jack took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would either change everything or destroy everything. "I'm in love with both of you," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know that sounds crazy. I know it goes against everything I was taught. But it's the truth. I love Casa's strength and spirit. I love Ayana's wisdom and gentleness. I can't imagine my life without either of you in it. And I hate myself for feeling this way because what kind of man wants two wives in reality? Not just in name." The silence that followed felt eternal. Jack couldn't look at them, couldn't bear to see disgust or rejection in their eyes. Then Casa laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but a laugh of relief. "You are an idiot," she said, but her voice was warm. "We feel the same way, and we have been miserable trying to figure out if you felt it too." Jack's head snapped up. "What?" Ayana smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "We talked about this, Casa and I. We both have feelings for you. Real feelings. Not obligation, not gratitude, love, but Jack's mind was reeling. How is this possible? How can this work? "We were both wives to the chief," Casa said practically. "It worked then. Why not now?" "Because the chief was Apache," Jack said. "This is different. The whole territory already thinks we're living in sin. If we actually choose this, if we make this real, the judgment will be 10 times worse." "Let them judge," Casa said fiercely. "I am tired of living my life based on what others think. I want to live for what makes me happy. And you make me happy, Jack Morrison, even though you are stubborn and sometimes foolish." Ayana reached out and took Jack's hand. Her touch was gentle but firm. We have a choice now, she said. We can continue living as we are with these feelings locked away, pretending we feel nothing. Or we can be brave and choose each other, all three of us together. It will not be easy. The world will hate us even more than they already do. But at least we will be happy. At least we will be choosing our own path. Jack looked at both women, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was insane. This went against everything society said was proper. His parents would be horrified. The church would condemn him. The neighbors already hated him, but this would make it so much worse. But when he looked at Casa's fierce, beautiful face and at Ayana's gentle, wise eyes, Jack knew he had already made his choice. Maybe he had made it months ago. Maybe he had made it the moment he promised the dying chief to protect them. Or maybe he was making it right now in this moment with the stars watching overhead. I don't know how this will work, Jack said honestly. I don't know if we're making a terrible mistake, but I know that I want to try. I want to build something real with both of you. Not because tradition forced us together, but because we choose it, all of us, freely choosing. Casa stood up and walked over to him. She cupped his face in her strong hands and kissed him, fierce and passionate, pouring months of suppressed feelings into that single moment. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. Then we try, she said. Ayana stood too, more hesitant but no less certain. She kissed Jack softly, sweetly, a kiss that spoke of deep emotion and tender hope. We try, she agreed. They stayed up talking until dawn, all three of them. They discussed how this would work, what they wanted from each other, what they were afraid of, what they hoped for. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were tears and fears and uncertainties, but there was also laughter and hope and a sense of rightness that none of them could deny. We are going to be seen as freaks, Jack warned them. Outcasts. People will say terrible things, they already do, Casa pointed out. At least now we will be happy outcasts. Are you sure? Jack asked Ayana. You loved the chief so much. Is it too soon? Ayana shook her head. I will always love him. He will always be part of my heart. But the heart is not a cup that can only hold so much love. It is more like a fire that grows bigger as you add to it. I can love his memory and love you too. They are different loves, but both are real. As the sun rose over the desert, painting everything in shades of gold and pink, three people sat together on a porch, having made the most unconventional decision of. The decision to make their unconventional marriage real changed everything. That morning after their long talk, Jack moved his belongings into the house properly. Casa finally abandoned the barn for good. The three of them began sharing their lives completely, not as strangers or obligation, but as people who had chosen each other. For the first time since that terrible day when Chief Nahilzai died, all three of them felt genuinely happy. But happiness made them careless. They were so focused on building their new life together that they stopped paying attention to the threats gathering around them. And there were plenty of threats. Their ranch sat on land with one of the best water sources in the territory, especially valuable during the ongoing drought. Several men had offered to buy Jack's land over the years, but he had always refused. Now, with the situation being what it was, some people saw an opportunity. Malcolm Briggs was the worst of them. He was a land grabber, the kind of man who took what he wanted and didn't care who got hurt in the process. He owned a large spread to the south, but he wanted more. He wanted Jack's water rights. He had tried to buy the land legally, but Jack refused to sell. So Malcolm decided to take a different approach. Morrison's got those two squaws living with him now, Malcolm told his men one evening at the saloon. Whole territories disgusted. Man like that living in sin, breaking every law of decent society. Nobody would blame us if we ran him off. Might even thank us for it. The men nodded. They were rough types, the kind who drifted from ranch to ranch, always in trouble, always looking for easy money. Malcolm paid them well to do his dirty work. When do we go? One of them asked. Saturday, Malcolm said. Morrison goes to town every Saturday for supplies. We'll pay his ranch a visit while he's gone. Scare those women off, burn some buildings, make it clear he's not welcome anymore. Without those Apache women and their desert tricks, he'll have no choice but to sell and move on. It was a cowardly plan, waiting until Jack was away to attack women. But Malcolm Briggs wasn't known for his courage, only for his greed. That Saturday morning, Jack prepared to ride to town as usual. He was actually looking forward to it for once. Now that he and the women had made their relationship official, at least to themselves, he felt lighter somehow, happier. He didn't care as much what people thought anymore. "I'll be back before dark," Jack told Casa and Ayana. "Need anything special from town?" "Just be careful," Ayana said, kissing him goodbye. This open affection was still new to all of them, but it felt wonderful. Casa hugged him too, fierce and quick. "The townspeople are stupid, but they are not usually dangerous. Still keep your eyes open," Jack laughed. "I think I can handle buying supplies without getting into trouble." He rode off toward town, completely unaware that he was leaving the women alone and vulnerable. It was a mistake that almost cost them everything. Casa and Ayana spent the morning working around the ranch. They had developed a good system, dividing up the tasks based on their different strengths. Casa handled the heavier work with the animals and fences. Ayana managed the garden and the household. They worked in comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging words, sometimes breaking into laughter over small things. It was just after noon when Ayana noticed the dust on the horizon. Riders approaching, and several of them. Her stomach tightened with instinctive worry. "Casa," she called out. "We have visitors." Casa came out of the barn, her hand automatically going to the knife she always wore at her belt. Years of living on the frontier had taught her to be cautious. She counted 5 riders coming fast. This wasn't a friendly visit. "Get the rifles," Casa said quietly, her voice completely calm despite the danger. Both women had learned to shoot over the past months. Jack had insisted on it, saying that life on the frontier was too dangerous for anyone not to know how to defend themselves. They had practiced until they were both decent shots, though neither was particularly enthusiastic about guns. Now they were grateful for those lessons. The riders pulled up in front of the house, spreading out in a semicircle. Malcolm Briggs sat in the middle, a nasty grin on his face. His men looked rough and mean, the kind who enjoyed hurting people. Well, Malcolm said. "Where's your man, girls?" "He will return soon," Ayana said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you want?" "Just came by to deliver a message," Malcolm said. "This land ain't suitable for Morrison anymore. Too many decent folks upset about the situation here. Time for him to sell and move on." "The land is not for sale," Casa said coldly. "Leave now," Malcolm laughed. "You got spirit, I'll give you that. But you're in no position to be giving orders." He nodded to his men. "Boys, let's show these squaws what happens when people don't listen to good advice." The men dismounted and started toward the house. Casa and Ayana backed up slowly until they were at the doorway. Then Casa raised her rifle, pointing it directly at Malcolm's chest. "One more step," she said, her voice deadly calm, "and I will shoot you." Malcolm's grin faded. He hadn't expected resistance. Most women would have screamed and run. But Casa wasn't most women. She stood there, rifle steady, eyes fierce, looking completely capable of following through on her threat. "You wouldn't dare," Malcolm said, but his voice lacked confidence. "Try me," Casa replied. For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of Malcolm's men made a rush for the house, trying to call what he thought was a bluff. Casa smoothly shifted her aim and fired. The bullet hit the ground right in front of the man's feet, kicking up dirt. He jumped back with a yelp. "Next one goes through flesh," Casa promised. Inside the house, Ayana had positioned herself at a window with her own rifle. She might not be as bold as Casa, but she was just as determined to protect their home. When another of Malcolm's men tried to circle around to the side, Ayana fired a warning shot that made him think twice. Malcolm's face turned red with anger. "You think 2 women can hold off 5 men? We'll rush you all at once. You can't shoot us all." "Maybe not," Casa admitted, "but I will shoot you first, and then the man next to you. And by the time your friends kill me, you will both be dead." "Is this land worth your life, Malcolm Briggs?" Malcolm hesitated. He had come expecting easy intimidation, maybe a little property damage. He hadn't expected an actual fight, and the Apache woman standing in front of him looked completely serious about killing him. "This ain't over," Malcolm snarled. "Morrison's gonna pay for harboring you savages." "Leave now," Casa repeated, "or find out how savage I can really be." Malcolm looked at his men, calculating odds, weighing risks. Finally, his greed was outweighed by his fear. "Mount up," he ordered his men. "We'll come back when Morrison's here. Let him deal with his own problems." But as they started to leave, one of the younger men, drunk and stupid, decided to fire his gun toward the house. It was meant to be a parting gesture of contempt, a way to save face. But the bullet struck the doorframe inches from Ayana's head. That was a mistake. Casa's rifle cracked, and the young man screamed, clutching his arm where the bullet had grazed him. I warned you, Casa said coldly. Next time I will not miss. Malcolm grabbed the wounded man's reins and spurred his horse. The group rode off quickly, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. As soon as they were gone, Ayanna came out of the house. Her hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. That was close, she whispered. Casa lowered her rifle, her fierce expression softening. You did well, sister. You held your position like a warrior. I was terrified, Ayanna admitted. So was I, Casa said quietly, but we did not let them see it. We protected our home, our family. They sat on the porch, rifles across their laps, waiting for Jack to return. Neither woman spoke much, but their minds were racing. They had defended the ranch successfully, but this was just the beginning. Malcolm Briggs wouldn't let this go. He would be back, probably with more men, probably angrier. When Jack finally rode back just before sunset, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The women were sitting on the porch, still armed, tension radiating from them. What happened? He asked, dismounting quickly. They told him everything. As the story unfolded, Jack's expression grew darker and darker. When they finished, he was silent for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. I should have been here, he said, guilt heavy in his voice. I should have protected you. We protected ourselves, Casa said firmly. And we protected your land. Our land. Jack looked at both women with a mixture of pride, fear, and love. You could have been killed. But we were not, Ayanna said gently. We were strong together. Jack pulled them both into his arms, holding them tight. In that moment, something fundamental shifted. They weren't his responsibility anymore. They weren't women he was protecting out of obligation or even love. They were his partners, his equals, his family in the truest sense. They had proven they could hold their own, that they would fight for their home with the same ferocity he would. We need to prepare, Jack said finally, releasing them. Malcolm will be back, probably with more men. We need to be ready. Over the next few days, the three of them turned the ranch into a fortress. They stockpiled ammunition, set up defensive positions, and developed signals in case of trouble. Jack taught the women more advanced shooting techniques. Casa shared Apache tactics for defense and ambush. Word spread fast about the attack on the Morrison ranch. But depending on who was telling the story, the details changed dramatically. In town, Malcolm Briggs claimed he had gone to the ranch with a peaceful business offer, only to be shot at by Jack's wild Apache women. He showed off the wounded man's arm as proof of their savagery. The townspeople, already uncomfortable with the situation at the Morrison ranch, were eager to believe the worst. By the time Jack rode into town the following week, the mood had turned openly hostile. Men who had simply ignored him before now glared with active hatred. Women pulled their children away when he walked past. When he tried to enter the general store, Mrs. Henderson blocked the doorway. We don't serve your kind here anymore, she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. Living in sin with two savage women, shooting at decent white men. You're a disgrace, Jack Morrison. Malcolm Briggs attacked my home, Jack said, trying to keep his voice level. My wives defended themselves. Wives? Mrs. Henderson laughed cruelly. You can't have two wives. That's not marriage, that's an abomination. The sheriff should arrest you for what you're doing out there. As if summoned by his name, Sheriff Tom Bradley appeared. He was a hard man, more concerned with keeping the peace than with actual justice. Morrison, he said coldly, I've been hearing complaints about you. Have you heard the truth? Jack asked. That Briggs tried to run me off my land? That he threatened my family? I heard you've got two Indian women living with you in an immoral arrangement, the sheriff said. And that when decent citizens tried to talk some sense into you, those women shot at them. They defended our home from armed men who came while I was away, Jack corrected. There's nothing immoral about our arrangement. We're a family. The sheriff shook his head. The law says a man can have one wife. Morrison, one. What you're doing out there is illegal, immoral, and causing problems for this whole community. The law also says a man has the right to defend his property, Jack shot back. And that's all we did. I'm warning you, the sheriff said, his hand resting on his gun. You need to get rid of those women. Send them back to their people. Return to being a decent Christian man. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to take action. What action? Jack demanded. Arrest me for what? Living peacefully on my own land? For violating public morality. the sheriff said. For cohabitation with multiple women. For creating a public nuisance. I can think of half a dozen charges if I need to. Jack looked around at the crowd that had gathered. Dozens of faces all filled with judgment and disgust. Not a single friendly expression among them. He realized with cold clarity that the law wouldn't protect him here. These people had already decided he was guilty. I'm not breaking any real laws, Jack said firmly. And I'm not getting rid of my family. You want to arrest me, Sheriff? Go ahead and try. But know that you'll be arresting an innocent man while letting Malcolm Briggs walk free after attacking a home. The sheriff's face reddened. Get out of my town, Morrison. And don't come back until you've cleaned up your situation. Jack left without getting his supplies. He rode back to the ranch, his mind churning with anger and fear. The situation was worse than he thought. It wasn't just social disapproval anymore. The law itself was being turned against them. When he told Casa and Ayanna what happened, both women took the news seriously. They will come for us eventually, Casa said. When white men decide something is wrong, they do not stop until they destroy it. We could leave, Ayanna suggested quietly. Find somewhere new, start over where nobody knows us. Run away? Jack shook his head. This is our land, our home. We've done nothing wrong. Why should we be the ones to leave? But the pressure kept building. The church sent a delegation. 3 grim-faced elders who stood on the porch and told Jack he was bound for eternal punishment unless he repented. The neighboring ranchers stopped all business dealings with him, refusing to trade or help with work that required multiple hands. Even the Apache community was divided. Some elders felt Jack was dishonoring their traditions. Others argued he was keeping the spirit of what Chief Nahilzai had requested, even if the form was unusual. The isolation was crushing. Every trip to town brought more hostility. Business owners refused to serve him. Children threw rocks at his wagon. Someone painted sinner on his fence. The weight of constant judgment wore on all 3 of them, testing their resolve. One particularly hard night, Ayanna broke down crying. Maybe they are right, she sobbed. Maybe what we are doing is wrong. Maybe we are breaking laws, both white and Apache. Maybe I am betraying the chief's memory. No, Casa said fiercely, holding her sister-wife. The chief wanted us safe and happy. We are both. Those people out there, they do not care about right or wrong. They only care about control, about making everyone fit into their narrow idea of how life should be. But even Casa's fierce spirit was being tested. The constant hostility, the threats, the isolation, it was taking its toll on all of them. Then, unexpectedly, they found an ally. Judge Harrison Miller was an aging circuit judge who rode through the territory settling legal disputes. He had seen every kind of frontier situation imaginable during his 40 years on the bench. He had dealt with claim jumpers, cattle rustlers, land disputes, mining conflicts, and every variety of human drama the West could produce. Very little surprised him anymore. When he heard about the Morrison situation, his curiosity was piqued. He made a point to visit the ranch himself, unannounced, wanting to see the truth with his own eyes. Jack was suspicious when the old judge rode up. Come to arrest me? He asked warily. Just to talk, the judge said, dismounting stiffly. Mind if I water my horse? Jack nodded, and the judge took his time looking around the ranch. He noticed how well-maintained everything was, how the cattle looked healthy despite the drought, how the garden thrived. When Casa and Ayanna came out of the house, he observed how they moved with confidence and dignity, not like women being held against their will. Your wives? He asked Jack simply. Yes, Jack said, ready to defend himself. Interesting setup, the judge said, but his tone wasn't judgmental. Mind if I ask how this came about? Over the next hour, Jack told him the whole story. The dying chief, the obligation, how they had grown to care for each other genuinely, how they chose to make it real. The judge listened without interrupting, his weathered face revealing nothing. When Jack finished, the judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You know I can't legally marry you. The law only recognizes one wife. I know, Jack said. But, the judge continued, I can help you protect what you've built here. Property rights, I mean. Make sure both women have legal claim to the land if something happens to you. Set up protection so nobody can take this from them. Jack blinked in surprise. You're not here to condemn us? The judge chuckled. Son, I've been working on this frontier longer than you've been alive. I've seen all kinds of arrangements. Miners sharing wives because women were scarce, families combining after tragedy, people making do the best they can in hard circumstances. What matters to me isn't whether your situation fits some neat little box. What matters is whether people are being treated fairly and with respect. He looked at Casa and Ayana. Are you here because you want to be? Or because you're being forced? We choose this, Casa said firmly. All of us choose it. Then that's good enough for me, the judge said. Now let's talk about how to protect you legally. Over the next few days, Judge Miller worked with Jack to set up documents that gave both Casa and Ayana equal rights to the property. He couldn't call it a marriage legally, but he could make sure they were protected financially. More importantly, he made sure the documents were witnessed and filed properly, giving them legal weight. Before he left, the judge did something unexpected. He wrote a letter to the territorial newspaper. In it, he described visiting the Morrison Ranch and finding a family unit that, while unconventional, was built on genuine care and respect. He pointed out that frontier life required flexibility and that rigid moral judgments often did more harm than good. He concluded by saying that if more people focused on whether folks were treating each other well, rather than whether they fit traditional molds, the territory would be better off. The letter was published and caused an immediate uproar. Some people denounced the judge as senile or corrupt, but others quietly began to reconsider their harsh stance. A few brave souls even spoke up in defense of Jack and his unusual family. One of them was Doc Reynolds, the town doctor. He had refused to come to the Morrison Ranch during the earlier crisis, something he felt guilty about. Now he publicly stated that denying medical care to people based on their private arrangements was wrong. He announced he would treat anyone who needed help, regardless of their situation. A rancher named Bill Tucker, whose spread bordered Jack's land, stopped by one afternoon. I don't fully understand what you've got going here, he admitted. And I can't say I'd make the same choices, but you've always been a fair neighbor, and your land is well kept. That counts for something. If you need a hand with work, let me know. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. For the first time since this all began, Jack felt like maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't be completely isolated forever. Spring came to the Arizona desert in 1889, bringing with it wildflowers, warmer days, and an unexpected revelation. Ayana had been feeling strange for weeks, tired in the mornings, emotional in ways that seemed out of character. At first, she thought it was just stress from the ongoing tension with the community, but as the symptoms continued, she began to suspect something else. One evening, she asked Kisa to walk with her away from the house. The two women had grown incredibly close over the months, more like true sisters than sister wives. They shared everything, supported each other through difficulties, and had no secrets between them. I think I am pregnant, Ayana said quietly. Once they were alone, Casa stopped walking, her eyes going wide. Then a huge smile broke across her face. That is wonderful. She pulled Ayana into a fierce hug. Why do you look worried? This is good news, is it? Ayana asked, anxiety clear in her voice. A baby will make everything more complicated. People already judge us. What will they say when there is a child? And what if something goes wrong? What if... Her voice broke. Casa understood immediately. Childbirth was dangerous on the frontier. Many women died bringing babies into the world. And if something went wrong, would the town doctor come to help? Or would he refuse as he had refused before, condemning their immoral household? Nothing will go wrong, Casa said firmly, trying to convince herself as much as Ayana. We will make sure of it. And Jack will be so happy. You must tell him tonight. When they returned to the house, Ayana's hands were shaking. Jack was on the porch fixing a saddle. He looked up and immediately knew something was happening. The women's faces were too serious, too emotional. What's wrong? He asked, setting down his work. Ayana took a deep breath. Nothing is wrong. I'm going to have a baby. Our baby? For a moment, Jack just stared at her, not quite processing the words. Then understanding crashed over him like a wave, and his face transformed with pure joy. He jumped up and grabbed Ayana, spinning her around, laughing with delight. Then he pulled Casa into the embrace too, the three of them holding each other, laughing and crying at the same time. A baby, Jack kept saying, as if he couldn't quite believe it. We're going to have a baby. That night was one of celebration and hope. They talked about names, about what the baby might look like, about all the dreams they had for this child. It felt like a blessing, like confirmation that what they had built together was real and good and meant to be. But as Ayana's pregnancy progressed, complications began to emerge. By the 5th month, it became clear that something wasn't right. The baby was positioned wrong, breech with its feet pointing down instead of its head. Ayana's stomach was larger than it should be, and she struggled with pain that worried all of them. Casa had some knowledge of childbirth from her time with the Apache, but she knew this was beyond her skills. "We need help," she told Jack one evening when Ayana was sleeping. "A midwife. Someone who knows how to turn a breech baby." "I'll go to town tomorrow," Jack said. "I'll bring back the doctor." But when Jack arrived in town the next morning and found Doc Reynolds, the doctor's face grew stern. "I said I'd treat people fairly," Doc Reynolds explained. "But I've been getting pressure from the church, from the sheriff, from half the town. They're saying if I help you, they'll run me out. I'm sorry, Jack, but I can't risk my practice. I have other patients who need me." Jack felt his blood run cold. A woman's life could be at stake. Maybe the baby's too. How can you turn your back on that? "I'm not the only doctor in the territory," Doc Reynolds said, looking away in shame. "Try Fort Collins. There's a doctor there who might help." Fort Collins was 3 days' ride away. Ayana didn't have 3 days, not if complications arose suddenly. Jack rode home feeling desperate and furious. This was exactly what they had feared. When they needed help most, their unconventional life would leave them isolated and vulnerable. When he told the women what happened, Casa's face hardened with determination. "Then I will go to my people. There is a midwife, an old woman who has delivered hundreds of babies. She will help." "Will she come here?" Jack asked. "To a white man's ranch?" "For Ayana, she will come," Casa said. "She delivered both of us when we were born. She is like a grandmother to us." That evening, Casa rode out alone, heading toward the Apache settlement. Jack wanted to go with her, but she refused. "Some things I must do myself," she said. "Trust me." Jack spent a sleepless night worrying about both women. Ayana was in pain, her body struggling with the pregnancy, and Casa was out there somewhere in the dark, riding through dangerous territory alone. He felt helpless, unable to protect either of them. Casa rode through the night, pushing her horse hard. When she reached the Apache settlement, she went straight to the dwelling of old grandmother Nako. The elderly woman was sitting outside, as if she had been expecting someone. "Casa," she said in Apache, "you have come far in the night. What troubles you?" "Ayana is with child," Casa explained quickly. "But the baby is breech and she suffers. The white doctor will not come. I need you, grandmother, please." Nako's weathered face creased with concern. "A breech birth is dangerous. I will come. But you know what the elders say about the white rancher, and your choice to stay with him. Some will be angry that I help." "Let them be angry," Casa said fiercely. "Ayana is one of us. She needs help. That is all that matters." Nako nodded slowly, gathering her medicines and tools. Within an hour, they were riding back through the darkness. It was a hard ride for an old woman, but Nako never complained. She understood that life was at stake. They arrived at the ranch just as dawn was breaking. Jack had stayed awake all night, sitting with Ayana, holding her hand as pain came and went in waves. When he saw Casa return with the elderly Apache woman, relief flooded through him. Grandmother Nako took charge immediately. She examined Ayana carefully, her experienced hands knowing exactly what to check. Her face was grave when she finished. "The baby must be turned," she said through Casa's translation. "It is dangerous, but more dangerous to leave it. The birth could be soon, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. We must try now." What followed were some of the most terrifying hours of Jack's life. Nako worked carefully, using techniques passed down through generations, trying to manipulate the baby into the correct position. Ayana was in tremendous pain, crying out despite her attempts to stay quiet. Casa held her hand, speaking softly in Apache, encouraging her to breathe, to stay strong. Jack felt utterly useless. All he could do was pace and pray and wish desperately that he could take Ayana's pain onto himself. This was his child causing her suffering. His love had put her in this danger. After what felt like forever, Nako finally stepped back. "It is done," she said, exhaustion clear in her voice. "The baby is in the right position now. But the birth will still be difficult. She is small and the baby is large." For the next 2 days, they waited. Nako stayed, monitoring Ayana constantly, giving her special teas to manage pain and strengthen her body. Casa barely left Ayana's side. Jack hovered anxiously, feeling helpless and terrified. Then, on the third night, the labor began in earnest. It was a spring storm, one of those violent desert storms with lightning and thunder and rain that came down in sheets. The timing felt ominous, as if the sky itself was in labor alongside Ayana. The birth was long and agonizing. Ayana screamed with pain, her body pushed to its absolute limits. Casa held her, encouraged her, refused to let her give up even when Ayana begged for it all to stop. Nako worked with calm efficiency, guiding the baby, watching for problems, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Jack stood outside the bedroom door, listening to the woman he loved suffer, feeling more afraid than he had ever felt in his life. He thought about praying, but the words wouldn't come. All he could think was, please, please, please let them both survive. Finally, after hours that felt like years, a new sound joined the storm. A baby's cry, strong and insistent, announcing her arrival into the world. Jack burst through the door to see Nako holding a tiny, perfect baby girl. Ayana lay exhausted but alive, tears streaming down her face. Casa was crying too, laughing and crying at the same time. A daughter, Nako said, placing the baby in Ayana's arms. Small but strong, like her mother. Jack approached slowly, hardly daring to believe it was real. He looked down at the tiny face, the little hands waving in the air, and felt his heart expand in ways he didn't know were possible. This was his daughter, his child, created from love that the world called wrong, but that had produced something so perfectly right. We should call her Rose, Ayana said softly, looking up at Jack with exhausted but happy eyes, like the wild roses that bloom in the desert, beautiful and strong and able to survive anywhere. Rose, Jack repeated, testing the name. Rose Morrison. It's perfect. Over the next few days, Grandmother Nako stayed to make sure both mother and baby were healthy. She taught them how to care for the infant, how to know if something was wrong, what to watch for. When she finally prepared to leave, Jack tried to pay her, but she refused. You gave my granddaughters a home, she said through Casa's translation. You chose them freely, loved them truly. This is enough payment. Thank you, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved them both. I can never repay that. 10 years had passed since that desperate night when Chief Nahilzai lay dying and made his impossible request. It was now 1899, and Jack Morrison stood on his porch watching a scene that still amazed him every time he saw it. His children were playing in the yard with the neighbor kids, their laughter filling the air with pure joy. Rose, now 10 years old, was teaching the younger children how to braid rope, her patient voice explaining each step. She had grown into a beautiful child with her mother's gentle wisdom and a strength all her own. Her skin was a lovely blend of her mixed heritage. Her dark hair hung in 2 long braids, and her eyes held an intelligence that sometimes startled adults. Beside her, 8-year-old Thomas was showing another boy how to track animals in the dirt, skills his Apache mother had taught him. And 6-year-old Benjamin, the youngest, was racing around with pure energy, making all the other children laugh with his silly faces and wild stories. 3 children, born from an unconventional love, growing up in a world that was slowly learning to accept them. It hadn't been easy getting to this point. Not even close. But somehow, impossibly, they had made it work. Jack's ranch had become something unexpected over the years. It wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was a meeting place, a gathering point where Apache and white families could interact on equal ground. The water from the hidden springs that Casa had shown him years ago now fed not just his own cattle, but helped several neighboring ranches survive dry seasons. In return, those neighbors had slowly moved from tolerance to actual friendship. The house had expanded over the years, too. Jack had added rooms as the children came, building with his own hands and with help from neighbors who no longer saw him as an enemy. The barn was bigger, the corrals more extensive. The garden, under Ayana's patient care, produced enough vegetables to share with others. Casa had become something of a legend in the territory. Her knowledge of the land, her business sense, and her no-nonsense approach to ranching had earned respect even from men who initially refused to acknowledge her. She managed half the ranch operations now, making deals, negotiating sales, handling the business side of things with a shrewdness that often left others shaking their heads in admiration. People no longer called her Jack's squaw. They called her by her name, and they did it with respect. She had proven herself too capable, too intelligent, too valuable to dismiss. When other ranchers faced problems, they often came to Casa for advice. She gave it freely, never holding grudges despite how terribly some of these same people had treated her years ago. Ayanna had become the territory's unofficial healer. Her knowledge of medicine, both Apache and the European techniques she had learned from books Jack bought for her, made her indispensable. She treated everyone who came to her, regardless of whether they had once condemned her family. When fever swept through the territory one harsh winter, Ayanna worked tirelessly, going from home to home, saving lives without judgment or discrimination. People who had once called her a savage now called her a saint. She would laugh at that, finding it absurd that the same person could be both depending on people's convenience. But she never refused help to anyone. Healing is not about judgment, she would say. It is about need. Jack himself had changed too. The young man who once worried constantly about what others thought had become a confident father and husband, secure in the rightness of his choices even when others disagreed. His word was trusted. His handshake meant something. He had proven over a decade that a man could live outside society's narrow definitions and still be honorable, hardworking, and decent. The ranch had become prosperous. Not wealthy by any means, but comfortable. They had enough. More importantly, they had something many wealthy people lacked: genuine happiness. On this particular afternoon, as Jack watched his children play, he thought back to all the obstacles they had overcome. The early days of awkward silence, the attack by Malcolm Briggs, the town's judgment, the terrifying birth of Rose. Each challenge had tested them, and each time they had emerged stronger. The biggest surprise had been how the children changed everything. After Rose came Thomas, born to Casa 2 years later. Then Benjamin, another son from Ayanna. Each birth had softened the community a little more. It was hard to maintain hatred toward a family that was clearly raising good children with love and values. The children attended the small school in town now. It had taken years of fighting, with some parents threatening to pull their own children out if the Morrison kids were allowed in. But the new school teacher, a young woman from back east who cared more about education than prejudice, had insisted that all children deserved learning. Eventually, the objections had faded, mostly because Rose and Thomas proved to be bright, well-behaved students who caused no trouble. "Papa," Rose called out, running up to the porch. "Mrs. Tucker wants to know if Mama Ayanna can look at little Jenny. She has a fever." Jack smiled at how naturally his daughter said, "Mama Ayanna," distinguishing between her two mothers with ease. The children called Ayanna their birth mother Mama, and Casa Mama Casa, showing love and respect for both women equally. "Tell Mrs. Tucker that Mama will come by after dinner," Jack said. Rose nodded and ran off to deliver the message. Jack watched her go, his heart swelling with pride. His daughter moved between the Apache and white worlds with an ease that amazed him. She spoke both English and Apache fluently. She knew traditional Apache crafts and skills, but also read English literature. She was comfortable at a formal dinner table and equally at home sitting by a campfire. She belonged everywhere because she had been taught that she could belong anywhere she chose. That evening, after the visiting children had gone home and dinner was finished, the family sat together on the expanded porch. This had remained their tradition through all the years. This quiet time together at the end of each day. "Benjamin got in a fight at school today," Casa reported, though her tone suggested she wasn't too worried about it. "Did he start it?" Jack asked. "No," Thomas answered for his younger brother. "Jimmy Patterson called Mama Ayanna a savage. Benjamin punched him." Jack looked at his youngest son, who was staring at the floor. "Benjamin? He shouldn't say mean things about Mama," Benjamin said stubbornly. "No, he shouldn't," Jack agreed. "But fighting isn't always the answer." "Sometimes it is," Casa interjected, earning a look from Ayanna. "What we mean," Ayanna said gently, "is that words can be weapons too. Sometimes a clever response is stronger than a fist." "Like what?" Benjamin asked. Rose spoke up. "When kids say things about our family, I tell them we have twice as much love as other families. That usually confuses them enough to stop talking." Jack laughed. His eldest was wise beyond her years. "That's good, Rose. That's exactly right." Later, after the children were in bed, the three adults sat together under the stars, as they had done for years. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked quietly. "This life we chose?" "Never," Casa said firmly. "It has been hard, yes, but it has been real." True. I would choose it again without hesitation. I agree, Ayana said softly. We built something rare here, something most people never find. We chose each other freely, and that choice gave us all this. She gestured at the ranch, at the house where their children slept peacefully. Jack squeezed both their hands. I was so scared that night when the chief asked me to take responsibility for you. I thought my life was over. Turned out it was just beginning. He knew, Casa said thoughtfully. Chief Nahilzai. He knew you had a good heart. He knew we would find happiness together, even if we could not see it then. The years continued to pass. The children grew. Rose eventually married a young man, half Apache himself, who loved her fiercely and didn't care about her unusual family background. Thomas became a respected rancher, combining his mother's Apache wisdom with his father's frontier practicality. Benjamin, the youngest and wildest, became a scout and translator, using his unique position between two cultures to build bridges. In 1902, Judge Harrison Miller passed away peacefully in his sleep. In his papers, his family found a letter he had written to be published after his death. It was addressed to the people of the territory, and in it he wrote, "In my 45 years as a judge on this frontier, I have seen every kind of human situation imaginable. I have seen good people make bad choices and bad people sometimes do good things. I have learned that life is rarely as simple as our laws and customs pretend it is. But in all my years, I never saw a family that taught me more about the true meaning of love and commitment than the Morrison family." What Jack Morrison and his wives built together was not traditional, and it made many people uncomfortable. But it was built on genuine care, mutual respect, and free choice. I watched them raise 3 fine children. I saw them help neighbors who had once condemned them. I witnessed them building not just a ranch but a community gathering place where 2 cultures could meet and learn from each other. If we judge people by their actions rather than by how well they fit our preconceived notions, we might find that the world is much richer and more complex than we thought. The Morrison family proved that family can look different and still be real, that love can take unconventional forms and still be true, and that courage sometimes means choosing your own path even when everyone says you're wrong.